Malbolge, the sixth layer of the Nine Hells, a place so inhospitable even the Batazu can barely survive here. It is a permanent mountain incline where boulders constantly roll down its endless slopes, crushing any who dare to traverse this hellish layer. There's not much of value to a mortal located here, so why a Burke would want to know the dark of this place, I have no idea. But for you planar sages, barmy adventurers, and the curious governors who want to write it down just for the sake of it, I'll indulge you. So let's talk about how the different editions describe the sixth layer of hell. In first edition, it is described as a huge rockfall, quote, as if the great building blocks of the outer planes were suddenly knocked into a great pile, end quote. The plane consists of city-sized angular black stones. There is no flat ground. Every surface is inclined and jagged, creating huge passages and twisting angular realms beneath the surface. The sky is filled with blood-red steam. The ground is always permeating hot, choking vapors because the layer rests upon a lake of lava separated by hundreds of miles of thick black stones. The ground is hot to the touch. Anything flammable must make a save or burst into flames when touching it for too long. Things that are continuously touching the hot surface, such as the soles of boots, must save every 4-round period. It is dotted with copper-shod fortresses acting as the mini-homes of Moloch. Moloch and Beelzebul love torture so much that the layer is loud with the torments of Lemures, Malebranche, and the occasional spined and Styx devils. The devils here despise their rulers because of this, and any lesser devil you meet has a 50% chance of agreeing to rebellion if they think they're likely to succeed, and an 80% chance of missing a limb or suffering a similar infirmity. Malbolge is continually patrolled by pairs of Malebranche that capture intruders and bring them to their commander, either the pit fiend Bethage, the legate Tartak, or to Moloch himself or Beelzebul if he is present. Few intruders escape, and even fewer are allowed to live. In second edition, just like first edition, every surface of stone is on a constant tilt, anywhere between 10 degrees and 75 degrees. Because there are no flat surfaces, falling is a huge danger. Anyone who trips could fall for 10 feet or 10,000 feet before coming anywhere close to a landing. The biggest danger is the constant avalanches that occur. Boulders are constantly rolling down the hills of this layer and are impossible to predict. The ground itself is oftentimes made up of these ever-shifting boulders. Sometimes when they stand still for long periods of time, these boulders form tunnels underneath them that are safe to travel. But of course, you have no idea how long this will last before collapsing. The layer makes building not viable, so there are no cities here to speak of. The only structures that exist are copper-clad fortresses. Because of the treacherous terrain, all land travel is done at quarter speed. It can be done at half speed if a party is led by someone with the mountaineering proficiency and succeeds on a check. Each turn, keep in mind that in second edition a turn was 10 minutes, there's a 20% chance a boulder crashes through where the PCs are located. Characters must save versus breath weapon or take 8d6 damage, save for half damage. Each hour there is a 15% chance, plus 5% for each boulder that rolled down during that hour, that a major avalanche occurs. Those caught in this must make a save versus breath weapon or take 12d6 plus 12 damage, saving for half. In third edition, the layer was changed drastically. The Hag Countess Malagard started seizing in horrible pain, and the ground of the layer seized her wrists and ankles while she underwent a disgusting transformation. She ballooned in size, each body part growing at a different rate. Her ribs exploded from her chest and became an arching pair of mountain ranges that encircled the layer like a cage. Her skull mushroomed in size, becoming a fortress. Her fingers turned into white towers, etc. You get the idea. Her body was used as the foundation of a new and entirely different terrain. Throughout all of it, she screamed and screamed until finally the shrieks faded away and the layer was finally transformed. As far as I can tell, 3rd edition makes no mention of the layer being a perpetually tilted rock face riddled with avalanches. It got turned into a completely new terrain and therefore didn't have that property anymore. 4th edition describes Malbolge as looking like a decrepit garden, a place of rot and poison. Its trees are twisted and brown, its waters are poisoned, and the fragrance of its flowers brings sleep and nightmares. In 5th edition, it is back to how it was in 1st and 2nd edition, an endlessly sloped mountain where chunks of the layer roll down its sides, creating deadly avalanches of stone. There are some differences though. In 5th edition, devils that break the law are taken to Phlegethos for trial, and if found guilty are then taken to Malbolge for punishment. This contradicts 2nd and 3rd edition, where devils are tried in Phlegethos and also punished there, being suspended in cages to be burned in the pit of flame. 5th edition makes no mention of the pit of flame, and instead they're punished in Malbolge by being suspended in cages where boulders roll down the slopes of the layer and continuously batter them. I think what 5th edition is trying to do is give every layer a purpose. For example, in 5th edition, this is where the weapons and armor of Hell are manufactured, and where the iron is mined for it. Where in other editions, this is done in Phlegethos, and this is there just because it is. There's really not much of a reason given for the layer existing, other than they wanted 9 layers. And the same thing with Malbolge. For most of its history, it's an extremely inhospitable place, and there's really no reason for it to exist other than to be awful. Where in 5th edition, they tried to give it like a purpose. It's the prison layer of the 9 hells, and Glasya is its warden. Rulers. In 1st edition, Malbolge is technically ruled by Beelzebul. However, Beelzebul also rules the 7th layer, Malodomini, and is where his home resides. So, acting as viceroy to Beelzebul, Moloch was placed in charge of actually running this layer. Beelzebul is afraid Moloch might wrest control of the layer from him, so he has his tribune Byleth watch over him and orders Moloch to move from fortress to fortress constantly so that he cannot have a permanent abode in Malbolge. Beelzebul grasps and guards any power and knowledge he can to keep it from other archdevils, mainly Mephistopheles and Asmodeus, so he can eventually gain enough power to rule all the hells. Because of this, he kills most intruders in Malbolge, so as not to risk any information getting out. In 2nd edition, Malbolge is ruled by the hag Countess Malagard. She was a prominent member of Moloch's court, and some say she was his lover as well. In the time leading up to the Reckoning, she encouraged Moloch to join Beelzebul's alliance, so that when Asmodeus and Mephistopheles were out of the way, he could overthrow Beelzebul and take over the hells for himself. Malagard was secretly working with Geryon and made sure Moloch's armies betrayed him. When Asmodeus proved victorious over the rebellion, the rest of the archdevils fled or submitted to Asmodeus, but Malagard told Moloch he would respect his strength if he stood his ground. This was not true, and Asmodeus exiled Moloch for his impudence in the face of utter defeat, replacing him with Malagard. When Moloch was exiled, he was exiled to the prime material plane and spent a substantial amount of time gathering an army to take back Malbolge. This failed because he ended up getting trapped in an artifact. Later in 3rd edition, it said that he was able to get his way back into Hell, but now he can't leave Hell, and he's just sort of one of the exiled, outcast dukes roaming around Avernus. And then in 5th edition, it says that he can leave Hell, but anytime he enters Hell, he's demoted to imp status and has to stay in the form of an imp, and he can't actually regain his power while within the 9 hells. So it's a little inconsistent what Moloch is up to. It's kind of been retconned a couple times. Now back to the activities of the hag Countess Malagard. She travels between the copper fortresses in disguise to see what kind of reception she gets at each. If she is attacked on sight, she lays waste to the citadel, for she does not want mindless brutality from her subjects. Although her court lies spread out across the various copper fortresses, it is said that her home lies in a hidden fortress inside a perpetually rolling boulder. She stays out of Bathazu politics and has been trying to ascend to godhood, making several trips to the astral plane to investigate the dead gods there. In 3rd edition, Asmodeus used Malagard's body to transform the lair into a new terrain, and promoted his daughter Glasya to Archduchess of Malbolge. Glasya is known for being rebellious, and resisting Asmodeus' attempt to control her. In 1st edition, she was consort to Mammon. Then in 2nd edition, after the Reckoning, while Asmodeus was cleaning house, he forced responsibility on her by placing her in charge of the Erinyes. While waiting for Glasya to learn the trade of her father, he placed the Night Hag in charge of Malbolge as a placeholder to keep the throne warm. Then, in 3rd edition, apparently Asmodeus thought Glasya was ready and promoted her while discarding of Malagard. Glasya's favorite pastime is seducing mortals, then taking them back to Hell and informing them of the doom that now awaits them. Her new responsibility of ruling an entire layer means that now she cannot indulge in this anymore. Quote, Glasya is an articulate archdevil with a mocking attitude who loves to play verbal games with captured servants of virtue before dispatching them to her torture chambers. Helpless foes with high charisma scores can prolong their lives by feigning openness to her corrupting sexual advances. End quote. Glasya remains the Lord of the Six in 4th and 5th editions. In 5th edition, her lore is expanded on. She is described as knowing the law better than most, and is an expert at skirting it with technicalities and loopholes. She once transmuted lead into gold, and had the gold minted into coins and mineros, then used that gold to buy souls from Mammon, and immediately resell the souls for real gold coins. Once the payment had been done, the magic wore off and the coins turned back into lead. When confronted with this, she explained that the law only required coins be made out of a certain percentage of gold when minted. Once the coins left the mint, there was no law stating what material they had to comprise of. Asmodeus could not technically punish her, so instead he made her an archduke, by limiting her to only one layer of hell and having to deal with all the responsibilities that came with rulership. He figured her ambitions would be kept in check. Glasya's two main jobs in the 9 Hells, according to 5th edition, are that of warden and legal advisor. Devils that are found guilty of breaking the laws of hell and the diabolical courts of Phlegethos are sent to Malbolge, where Glasya decides their punishment. In addition to that, her deals with mortals revolve around helping them find legal loopholes to escape clauses. Most of her petitioners are souls that have pledged themselves to another Lord of the Nine and wish to get out of that contract. She has her servants scour every infernal contract and approaches mortals whose contract contains a loophole. Vassals. In 1st edition, you have the following dukes. Bethage, a pit fiend who commands 9 companies of Malbolge that defend the lair. Harrowball, a pit fiend who commands 16 companies of bone devils that defend the lair. Lilith, consort of Moloch and viceroy of Malbolge. She is held in high regard by many witches on the prime material plane, who guard the secret of summoning her. She is technically loyal to Beelzebul, but feels powerless and is sick of being ordered around to different locations with Moloch, so she is not against the idea of supporting a different archdevil to control Malbolge. She appears as a 9-foot tall, beautiful, curvaceous human woman. Her eyes glow white and she has crimson skin, black hooves, a serpent's tail, and small curving horns. She rarely wears clothes, instead cloaking herself in darkness when summoned. Tartak serves Beelzebul as legate to Moloch, viceroy of Malbolge. He is in a similar position to Lilith. He outwardly supports Beelzebul, but feels his position is of minor importance and would happily support another archdevil's bid to domination over Malbolge. He has a cruel sense of humor and enjoys tormenting weaker creatures. In combat, he fights with a flame-tongued sword and a rope of entanglement. He appears as a 10-foot tall human with a beard and mustache and stubby hooked horns on his forehead. His skin is fiery orange and his feet have the fur and pads of a lion, but not the claws of one. He wears black or purple silk robes. Byleth serves Beelzebul as tribune on Malbolge, acting as a watchdog over Moloch. He speaks with the authority of Beelzebul, and Moloch must submit to his commands. Moloch has tried to undermine his authority by spreading rumors to other devils that Byleth is insane. He appears as a 9.5-foot tall man in gold-coated plate armor. He has crimson skin, a beard, horns and hooves, and black leathery wings. He usually fights with his fist backed up by his massive strength. In 2nd edition, when Moloch fell and Malagard took over, all of Beelzebul's vassals withdrew from the lair. While Malagard ruled, no unique devil was ever given the title of Duke. The same is true in 3rd edition when Glasya ruled, with the exception of Tartak, who abandoned Beelzebul to serve Asmodeus' daughter. Inhabitants. Malbolge, being an extremely inhospitable lair, was avoided even by devils. In 1st edition, the most common devils found here were the Mela branch that made up most of its defense forces. In 2nd edition, it says bearded devils, ice devils, and spine devils are the most common. In 3rd edition, when Glasya ruled, Arenyes and Palarion were the most common because they were favored by Glasya. In addition to devils, 3rd edition states that fiendish vermin such as monstrous spiders, centipedes, and wasps were especially common. Locations. Copper fortresses. In 1st and 2nd edition, these are the only structures built in the inhospitable plane. They are built in the more stable areas of the lair, if such an area really exists, and boulders constantly careen off the metallic walls, creating a furious racket that echoes through the halls constantly. Ossiea, Palace of Glasya. In 3rd edition, this palace is made out of Malagard's enlarged skull. Its eyes have red-stained glass windows that can shoot lines of fire, and its windpipe goes into the ground, acting as a corridor to reach the administrative areas. It has 5 stories of luxurious chambers where she entertains guests. In 4th edition, it is a lavishly decorated white palace that is made out of the bones of countless victims. In 5th edition, it is described as being built on the slopes of the layer and supported by cracked pillars and buttresses that are sturdy but seem on the verge of collapse. Beneath the palace is a labyrinth of torture cells where she torments those that displease her. The Garden of Delights. In 1st, 2nd, and 3rd editions, the Garden of Delights is located in the 2nd layer, Dis. In 4th edition, it got moved to Malbolge for some reason, I have no idea why. So if you want to learn about the Garden of Delights, check out my video on Dis where I explain it in detail. In addition to those locations, there's quite a few 3rd edition exclusive locations. So in 3rd edition, the Hag Countess's body was transformed into multiple locations throughout the layer. I'm not going to get that in depth on them because there are 6 of them, and I believe they were retconned out after 3rd edition, with the exception of Glasya's palace, and I don't want half this video to just be talking about one edition, so let me just real quick go through them. Malagard's hair got turned into greasy trees, creating the very dense hair forest. Her innards formed a series of underground passageways, her bile became lakes and streams of acid and poison, her ribcage became a series of mountains, and her fingers became towers, one of which is hollowed out and used for torture. There's also the birthing pit, which wasn't created from the Hag, but is also only in 3rd edition. It is where the tortured soul shells are dropped in to be devoured by toothless mouths, and then transformed into lemures. That is the lore on Malbolge, the 6th layer of hell, throughout all 5 editions of D&D. Thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe to my channel for weekly Dungeons & Dragons videos.